Right, hello everyone. I'm George Baxter, your chairman for this evening's debate. I'm the current NFYFC AGRI chairman. My day-to-day role is an agronomist based in Cambridgeshire, looking after a vast range of cropping. I've been involved with CAMS YFC for about 5 or 6 years now, and also the Eastern area, and formerly before that I was a Yorkshire YFC member. It may seem as though our whole world has been turned upside down with the changes to every aspect of our lives during the pandemic. Coupled with that, a new agriculture bill and Brexit looming. There's been many changes to policy, so you might be nervous about how YFC life will continue, and I don't blame you. I think everyone is feeling some pressure. A little bit about YFC Agri. It's made up of regional representatives that are passionate about farming, YFC, and all things rural. We make sure young people's voices are heard at the highest level within the industry, and the survey is one example of this. I'd like to think that we've been quick to react, and one of the comments made within our recent research project was that young farmers are resilient, innovative, and will be making the best of the situation, which I don't disagree with. I might just refer to one of Darwin's most famous quotes: "It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor is it the most intelligent. It's the ones that are most adaptable to change." And we are facing some big changes in farming and how we conduct our usual activities for the foreseeable future. I'm confident that young farmers are innovative and very capable of adapting to what life is currently throwing at them. We just have to do this together, support each other, and have a mutual goal for a sustainable future, both in rural and the YFC environment. I just want to let people know that there's a question and answer function. Please feel free to ask questions as we go, and we'll try and answer those questions. But anyway, that's enough from me. I'm going to introduce some of our panelists on the guests we have. I would delighted to have them join us this evening. It's a great range with some familiar young farmer faces and also a few people that are a little bit more famous. So without further ado, I'd like to firstly introduce Tom Pope, who's a Somerset young farmer and YFC Agri Vice Chairman. So over to you, Tom.
Thank you, George. Yeah, so I'm Somerset County Chairman at present for the next couple of weeks. And similarly to George, but in a very different part of the country, I'm also an agronomist down in Somerset and Dorset. So that keeps me busy day to day. And I sort of got into farming and agriculture and really got my passion from growing up on the family arable farm, which has just cultivated that interest really. And the family arable farm is pretty diversified now, just to support that income. You'll notice in the survey something that came up a lot. We've got a dog field, we've got Christmas tree business, and a storage business as well. So yeah, keeps me busy. Back to George.
Thanks very much, Tom. Great introduction. That leads me on to our next guest, Ivan Annibal. He is the Managing Director of Regeneration, and I'll let him introduce himself to you all now.
Thanks very much, George. I'm thrilled to be here tonight. The reason I'm here, people may guess from looking at me that I'm not necessarily a young farmer, is that I really do a lot of work in terms of research around rural and coastal settings. My business has been doing that for about the last 15 years, and we've built up a relationship with lots of different organisations in that sphere. And so we were asked by National Federation of Young Farmers Club to help develop and run this survey. And so I'm here really just to offer some of the insights that have come out of that research and to perhaps offer some broader views from my experience of working in rural and coastal settings and a lot of my time working in farming communities. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to offer some insights, and we'll see how things go as the hour unfolds. Thank you very much, George.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ivan. Thirdly, I'd like to introduce Beth Duchesne, and she is the Eastern Area Young Farmers Chairman.
Thank you, George. Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be part of this debate tonight, to speak to you all about our survey results and everything that's going on at the moment. I joined Young Farmers as a junior member at the age of 10, which was 18 years ago now. And since then, I got the bug and have been a member ever since, working my way up through junior clubs, seniors, through working for my county federation, and now, as George already mentioned, as Eastern Area Chairman. Outside of Young Farmers, my day job as such, I'm an agriculture consultant, so I spend most of my time advising farmers and landowners on their farming businesses and different things they can do with that. We are arable farmers here at home near Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk, and we've always been involved as a family with the farm growing up. And for me, young farmers has always been in my blood. Both my parents were involved, and again with my job, I've always loved working on the farm. I can remember spending summers and everything here, and I'm really passionate about the industry. So really looking forward to this discussion tonight. Thank you, George.
Brilliant, thanks Beth. And last but certainly not least, that leaves me to introduce Nigel Owens, and I'll let him introduce himself. So Nigel, the floor is yours.
George, thanks very much. Obviously I'm here because I'm president of National Young Farmers, as I'm sure most of you are aware. I am also an ex-YFC member of Llanarth YFC, where I joined when I was about 16 years of age, and I was a member till I was around sort of 20. Well, I was a member till I got too old, but sort of didn't participate much from sort of 24 onwards, because obviously refereeing took over and time was very limited. I left school to go and work on a dairy farm as a farmhand for a couple of years before going back to school to work as a technician, and then left that job 13 years later to become a professional referee in a job that I'm still doing till today. But always enjoyed the farming life. Wasn't a farmer's son, living in a council estate in West Wales, but to spend my holidays and Saturdays when I was younger helping out on my uncle's farm or a family friend farm. And then after many years of traveling the world of refereeing and managing to save up, I last year actually managed to, 2 years ago, managed to buy a bit of land, put up a couple of sheds, bought all the machinery. So it started from nothing, basically. Not as fortunate as some of the farmers' sons and daughters, had to start from scratch. And I have now got the first cattle arrived here when I got back from the World Cup in Japan last year in November. And I'm now up to 40 head of pedigree Hereford cattle, which I'm enjoying every minute of it. So my heart is certainly in farming, and it's taken me 50 years to get my own farm, but here we are at it now. Something I'm very passionate about, from all aspects of it, which I'm sure we will cover in the debate tonight.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much for that introduction, Nigel. That was an introduction to all our panel. So I'm going to waste no time and kick things off. And if I may, Ivan, come to you. Rural housing. 81% of people who did the survey think it will be harder for people to live in a rural setting. I'm just interested what your take is on that.
Well, I think living and working in the same place, if you're in a rural setting, is really quite important, because I think people who work in farming, as Nigel has just said, are rooted to and passionate about the land and the landscape that they're based in. And there can be nothing sadder than being in a situation where you go to work in a place every day, but then you can't afford to live anywhere near it. And I think this is really an increasingly challenging issue. And COVID, I suspect this won't be the first time we talk about it. The last time we talk about COVID has made that worse to an extent, because we've seen a real upsurge in people wanting to move out of the cities who've got disposable income and financial wherewithal, wanting to move into rural communities, and that starts to drive the cost of housing up even further. So when I left school and got my first job, it was an expectation that if you had a half decent job, you could go and get a mortgage. And so people from their early 20s onwards, around the turn of the millennium, they were able to straightforwardly expect to get a mortgage and live somewhere. But today that's changed completely. And I think any young people under 30, even if they've got quite reasonable means, find it very difficult to find somewhere to live. And that's particularly difficult in the more desirable landscape-wise rural areas. And that's why in the survey, we've had this big report, not only that people are pessimistic about their ability to live in rural settings, but also very frustrated, because over 60% of the people that responded to the survey were desperate to move out of, and I don't think it's anything to do with their mum and dad, it's just with growing up, the family home, but felt very constrained about the sort of opportunities they'd have to do that in the current climate.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ivan. And Tom, do you think that's something that young farmers share as a problem in Somerset?
Yeah, massively. I mean, I think compared, it's potentially not quite as bad as being close to, say, London and places. But as trains are getting quicker and transport links are better, more and more people are starting to move out further away from the big cities, especially now working from home is such a possibility. And they're taking up sort of houses and increasing the price of the houses that sort of young people living and working in these rural areas would normally be hoping to try and get on the market and buy. So yeah, it's definitely the same here. Another thing I noticed is that I think due to this, and it's being seen as sort of an aspiration to move to the country, and people sort of finish their career and move to the country and they retire, that it's changing the balance of the sort of rural communities as well, that young people even wanting to stay, there's not as many other young people around, which is definitely changing the feel of rural communities as well, I'd say.
I think the dynamic is definitely changing in those rural communities, and Beth, look, rural life is a big part of farming. Where do you think young farmers can strengthen their position and gain a bit more recognition from working closely with rural communities?
I think generally Young Farmers as a federation does an outstanding amount of work with the rural communities already, but perhaps a lot of us aren't very good at promoting it and shouting about it. I think there's a lot of persona within Young Farmers that, as our clubs and counties, everyone does some fundraising or community support one way or another, but it's not something we necessarily shout about. And I think that's something we do need to get better at, because to help people recognise the hard work that Young Farmer members do in their local communities. I think there's also the opportunities to do some extra work. Potentially, I don't know if we could do some more community building type arrangements. It came up again in the survey that a lot of local young farmers feel that they need their community facilities such as village halls and all that kind of thing. So there is a potential that maybe we could combine that by organising some young farmer based events at our local village hall community centre, raising funds for that facility and demonstrating why it's so important, at the same time promoting what Young Farmers does and sort of showing everyone what we really do. But I think we do a lot of it already, we just don't shout about it enough.
And do you think, is there a way we can look back to the future? Nigel, I'm going to come to you here. You know, you were a young farmer many years ago. Is there things that we don't do anymore to connect with rural people?
Not that many years ago. Yeah. I think if you look at as individuals or as family or as communities, things have changed hugely in the last 20, 30 years. Time for people is of an essence now, although I think we may see a shift back to slightly older times because of this COVID. We've sort of realized and prioritized what things we've taken for granted. So I think out of the difficult time of COVID, there will be a lot of positives to come out of it as well. A huge wake-up call for a lot of people in realizing where their food and everything is coming from, how much of a great work the farming community does, and I think Beth touched on that and said that we don't. I think it's in our nature. We don't sort of brag about what we do probably well enough, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. There's also now a lot of pressure on people time-wise, as I said, but there's also as well. It's everybody wants something from everybody now, and I think has taken away a lot of that community spirit, which has been the backbone of the countryside and young farmers in particular communities over the years. And I think hopefully now we will see a shift back to that, I think, in raising the awareness of how important Young Farmers Clubs is to the future of the farming community and agriculture, but also the future of the countryside as well. So keep doing the good work that's being done, but also selling ourselves better in the nicest possible phrase of the words, selling yourself. So yeah, I think there is a lot of stuff we can do better and need to do better as far as promoting ourselves go as well. And we've sort of I think people have just accepted that, you know, this is going to be right. We're going to be here. This is the way things are going to be done for the next century. Well, no, times have changed. So we have to change as well. We have to do things slightly different. We have to improve in certain areas. We have to promote and maintain our core values as well. So there's a lot of things, I think, which we can learn going forward, and a lot of things that we can improve on. And as I said, you know, promote ourselves better as well. And people then will realize how important Young Farmers Clubs in particular is for the countryside communities as well, I think. And that's just raising awareness. And that is probably one of the key words today is awareness of things, you know, awareness of mental health issues, awareness of the plight of countryside communities, agricultural communities. So awareness is pretty much of a buzzword, I think, at the moment. And that's what certainly can do, is raise the awareness around the good and the things that can be done better as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, you've picked up on some really good points. I will come back to them. I just want to tie up, for me, this sort of outlook of the rural environment. And Ivan, if you could just sum it up in a few words, because you worked very closely with this project. I mean, do you think that what Nigel was saying about we need to engage more with the rural communities in which we live in, it was a positive that came from the survey?
I think there's a tide flowing in our direction, actually. And I think it's driven by COVID. I think it's led people to re-examine some of the fundamental things that perhaps since the introduction of the internet, and it's ironic because we're using it as a key medium now, but some of the old-fashioned courtesy, interaction, local provenance, those kind of things that years ago were core values of the way people related to each other, I think have been lost a bit over the last 20 to 30 years. And I think COVID has caused people to reassess the value of them. So people now want to know where the food they eat comes from. They're suspicious of big global movements that underpin things. And I actually think people appreciate the value of living in rural communities and speaking to their neighbours. I mean, you know, this whole process of applauding the NHS, you know, people actually on streets coming together. And I think that whole movement is good for farming and farmers, because I think it enables us to reconnect. I mean, on the back of this survey, I did an interview yesterday with Meridian TV with a lady who said, well, I know very little about farming, actually. And I said to her, well, actually, it surrounds you. It's not just the things you eat, but every piece of landscape you drive through is like that because it's farmed in one way or another. And farming is such a fundamental thing in everybody's lives that I think we have a real opportunity with this new set of values that are emerging to really promote it in a positive way. The thing I've got the greatest concern about, a lot of young people who responded to the survey have actually, is perhaps some of the impacts that Brexit will have on farming communities and some of the legislative and competitive changes they will introduce. But I actually think in a kind of ironic way, there's been lots of bad things coming out of COVID, which we might come on to talk about social isolation and mental well-being. But actually, in terms of people being prepared to understand the environment better and engage at that local level and appreciate rural communities and neighbourliness, I actually think it gives us an opportunity as farmers. And of course, we've seen young farmers, Beth alluded to it, actually getting stuck in and helping people as well. We've seen young farmer clubs delivering groceries, supporting frail and vulnerable people. So there are some good things to pick out of what's been happening recently. But yeah, I'll probably come on later. I've still got some quite significant concerns around the way Brexit's going to impact.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ivan. It feels like a good time. I know Nigel mentioned it a few moments ago about mental health. It's something that, you know, I'm quite passionate about. I know I'm going to come to you, Tom, because I know Somerset and certainly the Southwest are very passionate about it. They've been doing lots of things how do you think this COVID crisis has affected people's mental well-being?
I think it's been massive. I mean, not just in farming, but across for everyone, just not seeing people quite as much. I think some people that were sort of under the impression that potentially farmers might be less affected because they're so isolated anyway and they're used to it, but they might be isolated in their day-to-day. But then especially young farmers, having the medium of young farmers to be able to socialize and meet up with other like-minded people means that you still are getting out there and getting that social interaction, but then literally just working and going home. Great that we could still carry on working in a lot of cases, but it's been a tough time for a lot of people. In Somerset, we were, as a county, we were very lucky to be granted some funding by the Somerset Community Foundation, and we've trained up, I think it's 12 mental health first aiders who can go out to the clubs across the county and sort of be that listening ear to sort of be there and just to raise awareness. But I think it's great that I think the tide has turned. I'll say again that with the mental health as well, that as Nigel mentioned, awareness is key. And I think especially among our generation, the awareness is growing massively, and it's giving people that opportunity and that confidence to speak out more where they need to just have a quiet word with somebody, and people were a lot more receptive to it as well, I think.
I think Young Farmers has done a really great job over the last few months of keeping people together, but certainly, and Beth will know this quite well, in the eastern area, we may be struggling to get the engagement because potentially they might think they're getting value for money, or they don't want to leave the farm. But I mean, Beth, Young Farmers has been a massive part of your life. It's obviously difficult times at the moment, but it can really be a rock for people when they're potentially struggling.
100%. I think it's quite often probably overseen about how much of a community Young Farmers is, not just of your local club and counties, but your area and nationally as well. And that's something I've found really significant over the last few years in my sort of Young Farmers life as such, where I've started getting more and more involved at area and national level, is not only they always say the people and friends you make, all that kind of things, but actually the support network you have as well. And it's always really good to have those conversations, because you might find an issue that you have as a club member or in your county, someone else has had it before or also going through it, and bouncing off ideas. And that is one thing of Young Farmers which I think is really great, and especially during coronavirus as well. It's been really difficult for a lot of people, especially from a mental health point of view. As Tom alluded to, majority of farmers' jobs role haven't changed that much, but actually maybe you have to sit back and think about what's happened at your workplace. And even if you are on a farm, there'll be small things like, for us here, it's basically my dad and my brother who work on the farm, and we have some casual labourers helping out. But when COVID hit, we had to enforce a policy where it's one tractor, one driver. So to stop all this cross-contamination, which worked okay, because we were fortunate that we had 2 medium-sized tractors that could do everything, so that worked fine. But there were other people that couldn't. And yes, farming is a slightly isolated job, and yes, you are used to it, but you've always got that community behind the scenes. And a phone call is great, a Zoom call is great. I think we've all found that we know how to use video calls and conferences now at the back, as well as back of our hand, but you can't beat that face-to-face interaction. And I think that's what is starting to be an impact. It's great now that we are able to start having some Young Farmers meetings together, depending what your local restrictions are at the moment, because you just can't beat that face-to-face interaction, because you can see everyone on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you're on, but you can't necessarily gauge how someone's really feeling. And I think it's really important that you do talk about it, and generally Young Farmers is great. People are there at the end of the phone to chat if you need to.
Right, thanks, Beth. I mean, Nigel, it's something that you've openly talked about several times, and you've had a struggle with mental health yourself. What sort of words of advice, or even just the fact of accepting we're a lot more open, certainly this year, to talk about it, that's surely got to go a long way towards helping tackle the problem. But what would words of advice be from yourself?
I think farming community is very similar to the rugby community, to sort of industrial communities, whereas that sort of macho image that you carry the burden, particularly for men who find it much more difficult to open up and talk about any issues or any mental health issues than women do, and that is all across the board, and farming is no different in that. You also have where isolation is a key factor in it. A lot of people who are isolated in where they live in farming communities, either within their own family members or just on their own. You also then have the unsociable hours of working hard, and if you have any issues that trigger mental health issues, then it just compounds it by those unsocial hours, not seeing people, not able to talk to people, because going to young farmers clubs or seeing people, even if it's the rep from who's bringing you the mineral licks or whoever calls by, you're seeing people, you talk about things, you talk to somebody, and then you forget those worries for a bit. And I think the biggest message for me is awareness of it, really, is for people to share their experiences, not to be afraid to share their experience, not to find it as a sign of weakness, but actually a sign of great strength to be able to share those experiences, to talk about what is getting you down, because there will be something that will trigger those mental health issues. Whatever they are, it'll be triggered by something, whether it's financial worries on the farm, TB testing, which I've got now next in 2 weeks' time, which I am worrying about now for my first annual TB test. So there are always things that will trigger something. So you need to first of all accept that there are issues that you need to address that are triggering or causing these mental health issues. It's only then when you've accepted there are issues can you then move on to the next stage of what you're going to do about it. And that one cap doesn't fit all. When it comes to dealing with those issues, it could well be professional help. It could be talking to a total stranger who calls by selling something, or somebody who calls by regular. It could be the milk lorry driver. It could be family members. It could be friends. It could be people when you go to young farmers. It could be picking up the phone and speaking to people. Whatever they are, it's not for you to feel alone and feel isolated, that it's just you, because believe me, it is not just you. And I think if we can raise awareness on that and getting people to talk and open up about it and share those experiences, that I think will help not only the individuals sharing those responsibilities or concerns, but it will help a lot of other people who have either experienced it before or who are experiencing something similar as well. And it's not easy to talk. Remember adverts on television saying it's easy to talk. It's not easy to talk. It took me the best part of 3.5 hours to tell my mum that one word, that I was gay. 3.5 hours to tell the person that I could trust more in the world than anybody else, and wouldn't judge me, and would still love me, and I would still be a son no matter what, and my dad the same as well. But it still took me 3.5 hours. So it is difficult. So we need to sort of encourage people and make an environment that people will feel comfortable to talk in, and just words of encouragement and checking up on people. If you're thinking somebody's going through a tough time or struggling, just check, if they're okay, pick up the phone, just pop by to see them, and see how they're doing. And sometimes it's sitting down sometimes with just that cup of tea and just speaking and having a chat to somebody can make a world of difference. And I think that is the most important thing, is being aware of the people around you and caring for people, which the farming community has always done. I think it's probably the last frontier, I think, where people still pull together and help each other out, unlike any other community. Back in here in Wales, it was the coal mining communities until the 70s, 80s, until the glass coal mines shut down. But the farming community still is like that. Not the same as it was, but it still is a huge part of people pulling and working together, and that I think is key as well. I think in getting people through difficult times that they will find themselves in, you know, and I think it is important to talk. It's not easy, believe me, I know it's not easy, but to encourage people to talk and know that they can talk when they want to is hugely important, I think.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's really important, you know, live by the mantra that a problem shared is a problem halved, and building up a network of people around you that you can trust to offload on bad days and that you can rejoice in the good days. It's really part and parcel to the rural community that, you know, people are always at the end of a phone call. Even on your darkest day, there'll be someone at the end of a phone. And
just one thing, and just simple things as well. You know, what I learned as well over the years is you can't, well, you probably will, but you should learn not to worry about the things you can't control. If when I go to referee next week out in Belfast, out in Ulster, it's one of the worst places to go to referee when the weather is bad, because when the wind and the rain blows there, it is the worst place to be. But there's no point me spending that week worrying what the weather is going to be like, because there's nothing I can do about it. And if I'm worrying about something, then you're not focusing and concentrating and enjoying the other things you should be doing, and it affects you. It gets you down because you're worrying about something. So that's one thing I learned was the things I can't control, then don't worry about them. If you are worrying about something you can control, then you need to sort of decide, right, I can control this. So what am I going to do to prevent this worry? And a simple example would be if a young kid is worrying about his school exams, he's worrying if he's prepared enough well for them. Well, if he hasn't prepared at all and he's worrying about it, that's the reason why he's worrying. So if he then prepares for it, he can deal with that worry then. So it's in his control. So that's one of the, and it's just the simple things, you know, when you're worrying about something and you think, well, there's nothing I can do about this, then park it, forget it. Not easy, but, you know, move on from it. And just little things like that will all contribute to you then not having something to worry about and being able to be yourself and enjoy, instead of having to worry about things which you have no control whatsoever over.
It's such important words. I think the weather last year and the weather this year is a constant worry for people, you know, in the land. People are worrying. So, you know, I think that's some really wise words. And I'm interested to, Ivan, get your take on, there's a lot of things come out of the survey about that it will be harder for people, which will escalate the worry. So it will be harder for new entrants to get into farming, and it will be harder to work in the rural areas. Do you sort of get where they were coming from?
Just picking up on Nigel's point, just before I jump into that about control, there's I won't quote it, but there's a wonderful prayer by somebody called Niebuhr's prayer. If people get 2 minutes to look at that, it's all about really understanding the difference between the things you can and can't control. And that leads me into answering your question, George, because we did some research a few years ago to look at farming poverty really in the Durham Dales. And the one thing that seemed to, more than anything, conditions people's mental health and well-being was the amount of control they had over their circumstances. So those people that had very little in the way of human resource, lots of unpredictability in their life around the weather and other things, were really more likely to have stress and disquiet in their lives than those people who had more material possessions and were more able to control and manage the environment they lived and worked in. And I think if we then look to the future of farming, one of the things that comes through very strongly from this survey is that uncertainty in the way it's affecting people. I think this is a very tough generation to be growing up in as a young farmer, because you've got these two seismic changes. One, Brexit, which has been planned in and will have all sorts of consequences, and we don't really fully know how they're all going to play out yet. But the other one that then crept up on us completely is COVID. When you put those two things together, that creates a very difficult environment for people to respond to in terms of the countryside and being a young farmer. And it's clear that the ambitions that the young farmers have got are still the same. You know, Nigel was fascinating. He said it took him till he was nearly 50 to get a situation where he could have a start in farming. Well, that's going to become much more difficult over the next few years because economically, the country has virtually had to go onto a war footing. So once we start to adapt to COVID, I don't think it'll ever go completely, but I do think as an optimist, we'll get big chunks of our life back. We'll then have to start thinking about how we manage the huge amount of debt that we've built up. And that will make it more difficult, I think, for young people to be advanced credit, to get the opportunity to take on tenancies, and all those things that are key components of starting to be able to farm on your own. So that's a huge agenda. And then I think there could well be a big ongoing challenge around the availability of farm labour. So if you're a cereal baron in the east of England and you're highly mechanised, then you don't need very much labour. But in certain areas of livestock and horticulture and other areas, I think there are going to be some major changes to the industry around that whole agenda. And I think we'll see that things get more challenging there. And then I suppose, really, depending on your mindset, you would say that actually there's a three-legged stool of challenge, because climate change may increasingly make life difficult for farmers. And so before I start putting everybody off, I would say that notwithstanding those three big challenges, and they all come out through the survey, what is clear is a kind of dogged determination from the young people who've responded to it to want to shape a future in farming. And that's the one thing that gives me optimism, because we have got... The interesting thing about farming compared to lots of other professions is it's something you start with at a very early age. We've got a whole range of people in farming who, because the farm and the family and the community are integrated in a way that they're not in other spheres of life, by the time they get into their mid-20s, have got a level of understanding and expertise of that industry that young people who might just leave school at 18 or university at 21 and choose a career don't have at that age. And there's a real depth of knowledge and resource, I think, within this new cohort of young people who are coming through as young farmers that gives us a sense that at least they've got something deeply ingrained in the way they've grown up that will give them some of that resilience they need. But I think what we must do is, and I'm not saying this just because, you know, obviously I've undertaken this survey for the National Federation of Young Farmers Clubs, but we do need opportunities for people to socialise and connect and network, because even if you're very happy in your family, the family farm can be quite an isolated and lonely place. And one of the things that came out of the telephone discussions we had with people is that actually the fact that your group, your Agri group, now meet much more regularly virtually means that people are finding that they're developing connections that are stronger and friendships that are stronger across the whole of England and Wales in a way that they might have been a bit more just focused on their own backyard previously. So that opportunity, that infrastructure that exists around the National Federation of Young Farmers Clubs is very important in sustaining people in this future long-term challenge, because it's talking to other people that gives you the confidence and the support networks to tackle some of this adversity. And I think that's a really important element of the unique offer the National Federation of Young Farmers Clubs have, because as we all know, the average age of a farmer is quite advanced. And so it gives you a unique selling point in terms of your ability to harness that younger element, which is the future, but a very small proportion of the totality of farming. Sorry, there's a lot to pick out of what I've just said there, George, but I feel I'm getting on a bit of a roll now, but I don't want to take everybody else's time. So I'll draw a line under my comments there just for now.
I think they were really useful comments, to be honest, and it's a concern and an opportunity. I think there's a fantastic opportunity for new entrants to come into farming. But one of the things that was highlighted to me, and Tom, I think you mentioned in your introduction, is that you on the family farm are involved with, you've got diversifications, and I'll just quote exactly, 78% of respondents think it will not be possible to run a business without a diversification. In the meanwhile, just before I leave Tom with the answer, I'm going to set a poll rolling for people that are watching here to answer. It'd be interesting to see what are your rural concerns. So I'm going to launch that and come back to Tom. Tom, you know, will it be possible to run a farm business without a diversification?
Yeah, I think it will be, but I think it's becoming increasingly more difficult. I'd say that it's becoming more about, it seems to be these days, it's getting more that you either go for niche or you go for scale almost. I guess somebody coming into the industry might be more likely to be able to come in at sort of find a niche market and find that. But unless you have a very successful niche that you find, or you manage to get to some real scale and you get your sort of economies of scale, I think it's becoming more and more difficult to make a farm pay year in, year out by itself. I mean, just the diversification, how we saw it as a business at home. Well, arable farming, as you know, is two things that affect it massively that unfortunately are completely out of your control, or very much out of your control, is the weather and the markets, both of which, especially the weather, seems to be becoming more volatile. So then having a diversification business on the side, I find it very interesting that generally, say each year we go through the accounts at home and look at the diversification businesses, generally they're pretty similar to the year before, whereas the farm business is up one year, down the next, up the next, and up again, and then way down. And sort of there's not many other businesses that are quite as reliant on things out of their control as farming, but that's part of the fun of it.
And Beth, in Suffolk, is diversification something that you are running or looking towards running?
Yes, definitely. So we've got diversification projects here at home. Generally, similar to Tom, actually, we have a Christmas tree business, so it's quite a small scale, a temporary Christmas farm shop. And this year, actually, about 2 weeks ago, we just planted another 4,000 Christmas trees, just because we know that going forward, we're going to need that, as Tom was saying, sustainable income. Arable farming is our mainstay and always will be, but we've got that added pressure now, especially with the economy and bank lending. The banks always want to know what our income's going to be and how sustainable that's going to be, and having something that's relatively level will really help with that, because yes, we've got the good years, but we also have the bad years. We are probably not as well, I think in these, and especially in Suffolk, we're very arable farming related, and we've got quite a lot of high value veg crop growers as well. And actually their volatility is probably a lot more than cereal farmers are, because if you have a bad potato year, it's horrendous. And I also see this as work. So majority of my job role is managing contract farming agreements. So I see a lot of different farming businesses around the UK that are farmed on that kind of structure. And we are seeing more and more farm conversations about what else can we do to secure that level of income. And going back to what we were talking earlier about the concerns over Brexit and the future of young people going forward, I think there's also really important that we make the most of our young farmers contacts and groups, and this agri steering group particularly, with all our contacts with DEFRA, the NFU, the CLA, everything like that. There's an opportunity here for all of us as members to feed our concerns in, because it does get actioned. I had a query about BPS last year or earlier this year. I'd heard some rumours, wasn't quite sure what to do. So I sent my question to Sarah. She got it straight into DEFRA and answer back. And that's something that young farmers are brilliant at, that we have got that direct contact if we want it or need it. And this pressure that we have, there is an opportunity here, I can see potentially, of a new type of farming structure going forward to help new entrants into the business. We, as young people, can't afford to buy a farm. It's really hard to get a tenancy. My brother went through a process of trying to get a council farm earlier this spring, and I couldn't believe how much work he had to do, and it was so difficult. And at the end of the day, they said it wasn't down to price, but I think it probably was, which is really sad, because there are loads of people out there who love the opportunity and it's really hard to get. So I think actually there is a potential here to use us as young farmers, put our heads together with a potential new idea, a new type of farming arrangement that could help us in the future and take that opportunity. It's the same with when farm business tenancies came in and they overtook the old Agricultural Holdings Act tenancies. That again, I think from memory, my dad was saying something they really pushed through the Agri Steering Group back in the day. And now an FBT type farm tenancy is sort of the norm. So we know we've got that history there. And I think this is another opportunity to maybe see if anyone's got any ideas, a different structure, maybe more share farming licenses, I don't know. But there's definitely going to be opportunities out there to come. And we've got that passion in the membership. The survey showed that. So I think we could definitely something we could act on. Sorry, I'll digress a little bit there.
No, that's great. I mean, I personally, I think diversifications can be a blessing and a curse. I would love for farms to be profitable without them. This year's highlighted to me, and I know there are some people watching today who have got diversifications on their farm that are heavily revolved around people and in terms of wedding venues, etc., etc. And it's highlighted to me that, you know, diversification into something when you're in a pandemic, it could be detrimental to the farm business as well, not always positive. So I think it's worth bearing in mind that part and parcel, I think farming has to come first and farming has to be profitable as a baseline and the diversification as top up. I'd be interested to know what other people's thoughts are on here. If you've got any questions, the chat box is open. I'm just going to share the results with you all of the poll. Now, the question was, what are your top 5 rural concerns? And career opportunities came up the highest. There wasn't a lot to tell the difference between them. I find this quite interesting, as myself and Tom are both agronomists. Beth's a farm business consultant. You know, we are, you could call it a diversification of sorts. It's off-farm income, and so closely running up behind that was profitability, and that just absolutely hammers home into what we're saying about farm profitability without diversifications there. I mean, Nigel, your diversification from refereeing, if you like, was farming, or if you look at it vice versa. But has it always been a passion of yours to get into farming?
Yeah, it always be. I always sort of, even when I was sort of growing up, I wanted to be a vet first of all, but realized by the time I was about 12, 13 that I was nowhere near clever enough to be a vet. And then the next thing was to be a farmer. And unless I was going to marry a farmer's daughter, which was never going to happen, I wasn't going to land up with a farm. So it's been a lot of commitment the last 20 years at the professional end of refereeing, traveling, you know, away from home, probably around, on average, probably about 3 or 4 months a year during the year, somewhere in the world. A huge commitment every weekend, traveling, training, missing out on family, friends, weddings, and everything, stuff, you know, milestone birthdays and everything because of the commitment refereeing. But I was committed to that job, and obviously the benefits of that, I was able to save up over those years to start and get a small holding and start my own small holding farm along with my partner. I've had to start from scratch. I had to buy the land, put the shed up, buy the cattle, buy the tractors, buy the fork, the spade, the wheelbarrow, everything. So I am never going to make back the money I've spent in setting it all up. The only way I will make that money back is if I sell it later on, which I hope I won't be doing anyway. If I'm fit and healthy till my last breath, then I will be on the farm. So I'm never going to make that back. What I hope to do is diversify, and within the next, I've already sold a couple of pedigree bulls that I've bred up within the herd already. So hopefully that when I do start selling, I've gone into quite a niche market of good bloodlines within the pedigree stock itself. So hopefully that when I do sort of build the herd up and start selling stuff on pretty regularly over the next couple of years, that it will be able to look after the running costs of the farm and get a bit of income from the actual, then from what I've setting it up, I'm not going to get that back unless I sell the place. So that's the aim. We're also looking at turning one of the outbuildings, only one of them, because I'm pretty traditional in my ways. So I want to we're going to turn that into a holiday let as well. And hopefully then by doing that, in promoting farming as well, and people to come along and see the good work that, and the care that the animals are given on the farm. You know, people can come and stay in the holiday let, and hopefully the kids will be able to feed the calves and collect their own eggs and stuff like that. So to really sort of promote farming as well within the diversity of the business we're hoping to set up. And I'm, you know, I could have semi-retired and put my feet up and enjoyed the rest of my life, but I've gone into working harder now than I've ever done, because I am very, very passionate about farming. I love it. And I'm very, very passionate in helping promoting the great work that the farming community does, particularly the custodians of the countryside, where we sometimes get a bad name by some extremists, particularly in the media and social media today. And hopefully that I will help contribute to raising awareness and promoting the great work that not just the Young Farmers Clubs do and the movement does, but also the whole of farming as well. And I wouldn't be doing this today if I wasn't really, really passionate about farming and what I'm doing as well. Really.
I think you've brought some really interesting points to the floor, and I think personally, from my point of view, almost born to farm. I know it's a phrase and it sounds a bit corny, but you know, personally for me, farming has been a big part of my life from growing up. And I really think it's an important industry that we should be promoting all the way through, from young farmers and all the way through. That we do some really fantastic work. We produce some really great quality produce all across the UK. And at the end of the day, we're stewards of that environment. We should really hold our heads high for the work that we do. But I mean, this is a question for anyone. First to put their hand up can sort of take the lead on this one. But how optimistic are young people about their future? Go on, Ivan.
Farming is a very emotional thing, and it's about personal identity. And so because young people are largely, not in every case, but largely optimistic and quite fearless about things in life, I actually think that most of the people that responded to this survey are optimistic about the future. And I think I was thrilled listening to what Beth was saying, because I actually think that level of imagination about wanting to move the industry on as a cohort of young people by finding more sympathetic and more appropriate ways of doing things is really important. I know a bit about the history of county farms, and they were originally set up for people to get back to working on the land. And it's a great shame now that the way they're managed in most cases is not by the local authority, it's through a contract with a big agency, and they're managed just like any other parcel of land. And we've lost that rationale that underpinned them. And listening to Nigel's passion for farming is absolutely brilliant, because the thing that fascinates me is it isn't always an easy life, but it's something that people really identify with as part of themselves. And my business partner Jessica and I did some work some years ago with a Southwest-based organisation that supports farmers. It helps them with applying for their basic payment scheme. It helps them sometimes with mental health challenges. It also helps them around diversification. And one of its aims is to help people leave farming with dignity. And I remember having a discussion with the chap that ran it, and because I was evaluating it, and I said, right, we can tick all these different things off. You've done all this wonderful work. How many people have you actually helped to leave farming with dignity? And he said, none. And I said, is that because they had to leave without dignity? And he said, no, it's because none of them have left. And to me, that was really interesting, because what it demonstrates more than anything else is that actually it gets into people's bloodstream in a way that defines them. So I'm optimistic about the future. And I think a lot of the young people who've got a farming background here are, because it's a profession that, unlike lots of other things, is a lifelong passion for people. Sometimes that's difficult to understand for people who just drink milk or eat potatoes. But having spent the last 20 odd years working with and amongst farmers, to me, that is one of the great strengths of the profession. And it comes back to what both Beth and Nigel said. It's something we ought to actually promote a bit more, because it is a unique part of our character as a nation.
What are your thoughts from Suffolk, Beth? How optimistic are people in Suffolk?
I think it's slightly generational. So again, young people, I think there's a lot of optimism. I personally am really optimistic because yes, there's going to be challenges ahead, but with every challenge, there's an opportunity. And I think if we've got that passion behind us, I know we've got members in Eastern area that are really passionate. We've got people in the Federation that are really passionate, people that have replied to the survey. From what they're saying, they know it's going to be a struggle, but actually it hasn't put them off. And it's that determination that's going to get us through whatever's going to come, and coming up with new ideas and new ways of thinking, which is what this sort of debate and discussion tonight is all about, is actually is there. And I think a lot of it is, some of it maybe the passion is there and the optimism is possibly there somewhere, but not quite there yet, coming out, if you get what I mean, because people and members may not have the confidence that they can go and do that. And I think it's really important, and hopefully this survey has helped everyone realise that we're all in the same boat, and actually we can do this and go there and have a go, because what could go wrong? You won't know unless you try. And I really think there's going to be that mantra within young farmers. I think one of the benefits of coronavirus that's come out from that point of view is actually we have realised, as Nigel said earlier, everyone's reassessed what's important to them at life. And with agriculture and with farming and any part of farming that you're in, it is a lifestyle and the way you live for everything. You don't just go to the office 9 till 5 and come home and do something else at the weekend. Yes, it can be hard work and mentally hard work and long hours, but it can be really rewarding as well. And you buy into the whole package, really. And I think the optimism is there. And I think then maybe a little bit of reassurance to everyone that we can do this. But I really think we can, especially the young people in the industry. We've got so much potential to bring in. We've got a huge time ahead of us in our career. Agriculture is going to change, yes, but potentially for the better, or there will be opportunities there. We just need to find them and run with them. And if someone has an idea, try it and see what happens.
And Suffolk, Somerset, Tom, what do you thought?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, words come up over and over and over again, but just the passion, I think that's just what sets agriculture apart from any other or most other industries. I can remember going to university. I went to the University of Reading, so lots of different courses there. Made friends from many different walks of life, and they always found it amusing to start with, and they couldn't quite believe how into agriculture all of the people studying agriculture were and how much passion they had for it. They might have been studying business, but they probably, some of them might have, but not many of them were coming back in the evenings and reading the Financial Times for hours, whereas we were there sort of looking at the Farmers Weekly and the like in our free time as well. And just because that passion there, I think that drives I think that's where the resilience comes in farming. I think that's where it comes from, is just the passion to do well and to keep going. So I think it's a positive future. And I mean, like as Beth said before, from an agri young farmer's point of view, I think it's strangely, I think we're going to come out of COVID as an agri steering group almost better than when we went in, because discovering Zoom, having short sort of meetings here and there to discuss topics quite briefly, but getting really good responses is working a lot better than sort of three-hour meetings, which were, by the last hour, wasn't a huge amount of discussion sometimes because you're starting to tail off a little bit, running out of coffee. But so yeah, it's been a lot of positives. I think we can come out of this stronger than when we went in.
I think it's really nice that we sort of nearing the close on positives, because it's very easy to get wrapped up in the negatives from the survey, from life, from the weather at the moment. It is worthwhile remembering that we are in the middle of National Young Farmers Week, and on Monday we started the fundraising challenge. How important do we think it is to preserve NFYFCs for now, for generations to come in the future, and what sort of messages can we share to help motivate and support our fellow young farmer members? I'm going to come, Ivan, if I may come to you quickly.
I think there's collective strength there. The networks where they're most potent are an opportunity for people to share, and I think, you know, there seems to be no shortage of ideas about what needs to change. And I think, as Beth has said, the National Federation of Young Farmers Clubs gives people a vehicle to do that. And if I may just say, I think having somebody like Nigel, who's been a personal hero of mine for a long time without wanting to embarrass him, as a kind of failed but very enthusiastic rugby player in my own right, as a champion is fantastic. So I think that infrastructure, and then having one or two influential role models like Nigel to support the work of the National Federation is the way forward, because it gives young people a voice and some influence.
And Nigel, if I could just come to you, I mean, NFYFC president, what sort of words of motivation would you have for young farmer members to dig deep in this time and preserve the federation for the future?
Yeah, I think if there's one movement that can come together and support and get through this and come through it stronger, maybe by realizing some of the things that I said earlier that maybe we've taken for granted, like your weekly Young Farmers Club, and the friends, the things you do around the Young Farmers movement, which has just always been there, we've taken for granted. And maybe, so coming through this by pulling together, which the farming community will do, particularly the young farming community in particular, will make it become stronger as well. And as I said earlier, and I think Beth mentioned it as well, is to promote ourselves better as well. Look, there's a great work being done in promoting it, but there's more we can do. Particularly, it's still that sort of stereotype that you're a farmer's son or daughter, or you work at a farm to go to young farmers clubs. It's not. It's a hugely important part of the community and the villages and the towns itself. And I think, there needs to be now an opportunity to promote that and to widen that membership, not to move away from its core values and what it's all about, because that's what's made it so successful over the years, and that is hugely important to maintain. But also in making it aware to people that, you don't have to be a farmer's son or daughter to go to a young farmers club, because the Young Farmers Club to Llanarthen that I went to were probably down to something like 5 or 6 members. And then an ex-member who became a club leader, Howard Roberts, in the Weryn Drfach, on the farm where I actually worked when I left school. He then sort of got hold of my cousin, me, a few other people in my village who were not from a farming community, although they lived in the countryside. And all of a sudden, the Young Farmers Club was up to 30 plus membership and was hugely successful and strong for many, many years to come, with probably around 70–80% of those members were not from a farming background, but were from the countryside background. And it was an eye-opener for them as well to see the great work the Young Farmers movement does. So, I think that is the way forward, is to not to change the things what you do, but to promote it and sort of sell ourselves out there, and hopefully then to increase the membership without losing the core value of what the young farmers and what the National Young Farmers movement is all about. And that, I think, is hugely, hugely important for the future, because, families don't have 4, 5, 6, 7 children anymore. Particularly farming families would have 4, 5, 6, 7 children, pretty much all of them going to young farmers clubs. Some of them now have 1, 2, maybe 3 the most. So, it's important that we maintain and keep on increasing and growing the membership of the Young Farmers Club, but hugely important as well that we do stick to those core values and we don't lose that as well.
Yeah, I couldn't think of a better summary, to be fair. As an organisation that I personally owe so much to, been a big part of my life. I've met some amazing people, done some amazing things with young farmers, and I don't know if people always dive into venture into all it can be, because it really can be what you make of it. You can be a social member, or you can go right to the top, and believe me, when you get nearer to the top, the passion, the enthusiasm is absolutely there all around. I mean, I think we've had a really good discussion. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who's come along to watch it. and more so to the people who are here with me today, who have given you an honest and really great take on their views. Beth, Tom, Ivan, Nigel, really appreciate your time, clear enthusiasm for the organisation. You know, as someone who's getting along in the tooth of Young Farmers, my career is nearing an end. Seem to have a red card, if you will, Nigel, but it's been fantastic being a part of it, and I wouldn't want to see the organisation suffer, and to safeguard it for future generations. It's something worth saving, in my opinion, and I know that a lot of other people feel the same way. So if it's all right with everyone, I think a virtual sort of round of applause for all the panellists. You've done a great job, and I look forward to catching up with everyone soon, and enjoy the rest of National Young Farmers Week, and we'll come out of this stronger and a better organisation. So thank you again, and thanks everyone. All the best.
Pleasure. All the best, all.